afternoon, persons of quality, and welcome to our William Wordsworth presentation in a nutshell. Now, this may take me a little bit longer than the 5 minutes I did with William Blake, but nonetheless, here are my notes. I've got my ambiance, new fireplace that we put in for Christmas. Just finished it this past weekend. Makes it a little bit fun. Hair's too long. Gonna get that haircut this week, but that's okay. I make it look good. So here we go. So William Wordsworth is the second of our British Romantic poets. He's really the first one who's pivotal in starting what becomes the Romanticism movement. He's pivotal in developing all of these ideas. So we know that he's one of the founders of English Romanticism and one of its central figures and one of its most important intellects. He's remembered as a poet of spiritual and epistemological importance. So we're going to have an opportunity to look at epistemological, epistemological, epistemological. Now, if you remember what an epistle is, it's a letter. So it has a lot to do with writing short, very poignant poetry that has an impact. It would be great if you could look up epistemological for your notes. We know that he's a poet concerned with the human relationship to nature and a fierce advocate of using the vocabulary and speech patterns of common people in poetry. So, big departure from Carpe Diem. Big departure even more from the sonnet form. So this is much more organic in its presentation. So we know they began writing poetry at an early age, young boy in grammar school, and before graduating from college, he went on a walking tour of Europe, which deepened his love of nature and his sympathy for the common man. So the walking tour that Wordsworth took of Europe deepened his sympathy for nature and the common man. Both were major themes in his poetry. Wordsworth is best known for the larger work, the Lyrical Ballads, which he co-authored with Samuel Taylor Coleridge. And really, it has everything to do with the growth of the poet's mind. So it's a speculation about what inspires the individual in his or her understanding of poetry. So remember, this is a collaboration, the Lyrical Ballads are, with Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and together they wrote the Prelude, which is an epic poem chronicling the growth of the poet's mind. Wordsworth's deep love of the beauteous forms of nature was established very early in his life. His brothers and sisters seem to have lived in a sort of rural paradise out in nature. They had a terraced garden below a large house whose tenants, the people that lived there with the Wordsworth, included several other very famously known authors. So William Wordsworth grew up in an environment that was very much rich in all of this tradition and all of these ideas. We know that for Wordsworth, he's very much about democracy and the freedom of the individual and his or her choices very much in the world. And this is why he was so inspired by the French Revolution. And like Blake, got very much involved in the ideas of the American Revolution and any kind of fight for freedom that existed out there in the world. His sympathy for ordinary people remains with him even after his revolutionary fervor had been replaced by a quote-unquote softened feudalism, end quote, softened feudalism that he writes about in 1818. So there's a lot going on. So other things that we really can kind of siphon out as being important for William Wordsworth. Though he remained for the time being a strong supporter of the French Revolution, the poetic side of Wordsworth's personality began asserting itself, causing the poet to re-examine between 1793 and 1796 his adherence to William Godwin's rationalistic model of human behavior. His adherence to William Godwin's, I got to look it up here, rationalistic model of human behavior, upon which Wordsworth based his political theory. So I think that's an interesting idea, more because William Godwin was Mary Shelley's father, and we see the same sort of revolutionary tendencies in William Wordsworth that we see in the writing of Mary Shelley. Now, this might be a major aha moment if you are reading Frankenstein as your summer reading novel. We know that as Wordsworth turned his attention to poetry, he developed, through his writing, his own theory of human nature, one that had very little to do with this rational thought. So I want you to kind of look at what you can say in the big picture about the way Wordsworth did his writing. What can you hold on to as a specific idea that categorizes, characterizes, and sort of groups William Wordsworth's poetry? Giving you a couple of assignments and things to think about inside this lecture, so it isn't just zone out and watch the beautiful ambiance of the room. The years between 1797 and 1800 marked the period of Wordsworth and Coleridge's close collaboration, and also the beginning of Wordsworth's mature writing career. Wordsworth wrote the poems that would go into the 1798 and 1800 version of the lyrical ballads, poems like Tintern Abbey, Expostulation and Reply, The Tables Turned, and Michael. So I just gave you 4 poems. Now, what I did with this kind of a presentation for William Blake was that those were poems that we covered in class. For us, this is an opportunity. Poems that go into the lyrical ballads. Poems such as Tintern Abbey. That's the shortened name for a much longer poem title. We'll get to it. Expostulations and Reply. The Tables Turned, and Michael. We're going to probably cover 8 or 9 Wordsworth poems in this week. So you want to make sure you have that forward. Wordsworth seems to have been attempting to work out and justify his changing political and social ideas, ideas that had begun to develop intuitively during the process of his writing. So his poetry is going to reflect the maturation and the development of his literary ideas. The poet in Wordsworth was beginning to dominate the rebel, the democratic rebel. And the poet found a political philosophy based on power, violence, and reason anathema. And reason anathema. Now, I even did you a favor. I went through and I defined anathema. Anathema is something or someone that one vehemently dislikes. It's something that one vehemently dislikes. So let me repeat those 4 things for you. And the poet found a political philosophy based on power, violence, and reason anathema. Sorry, it was 3. So the anathema of reason, the personal aversion to reason. So I think these are some interesting ideas. Application. The preface to the lyrical ballads, the large work that defines romantic poetry, revised and expanded many times for later editions, is not a systematic poetics, but a partly polemical, partly pedantic, and still problematic statement of And I think I lost that last page of my notes. Hold on, let me look. Let me look. I did. I lost that last statement. So, the preface to the lyrical ballads is not a systematic poetics, but a partly polemical, Polemical, partly pedantic, you know pedantic from sophomore vocabulary, and problematic statement of philosophy. I want you to look up polemical and pedantic and how does it apply to William Wordsworth's poetry. So I think that is going to be incredibly relevant to how we are going to go through and cover our material. So I think there's a lot of information here, at least for us to start with, in our understanding of how William Wordsworth works. So, start with this, and in class, we're going to begin with a few shorter poems. I dropped it on the floor. I want to cover the Solitary Reaper. You can't see it too well there, but the Solitary Reaper. Again, lots of lyric poetry that we're going to review, but I think it's all going to fit together in our understanding. So make sure you look at these materials and have them ready to go as we move through this next week of school. So I'll see you guys later. Hopefully you had a good break, and it's now time to get back into the swing.